You've tuned in to KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Big question of the day. Thank you, Matt Gaetz, Florida Republican, for bringing this one up. What is an overeducated woman? And how can you be overeducated? How can you be smarty pants, too smart for your own good? Was it that nasty woman in 2016? Was she the one that broke you? You know, the one who was right about everything that's going to happen? Well, the Florida congressman tweeted out, how many of the women rallying against overturning Roe are overeducated, underloved millennials who sadly return from protests to a lonely microwave dinner with their cats and no Bumble matches? I don't know if that's an insult. I guess he's trying to say that there's something wrong with these poor women who won't give him the time of day. Here's the thing. I know what a lack of education gets us, because we all see it. I look at Matt Gaetz. I look at the conservative majority right now. I look at what I see in Trumpkin world. I see the poorly educated that Trump loves so much. I see what a lack of education gets us. I'm not quite getting the overeducated woman thing or the hatred thereof. Is this what's driving the whole attack on abortion rights? Is this part of that? Answer, yeah, uppity women don't know their place. Because according to, and listen to what they're saying to you. Listen to the words coming out of their mouth. You women folk, you belong barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, doing the woman work. Look, this is the world they want to bring us. And, you know, the reality is they've been saying this for the longest time. They've been saying we're going to use the Supreme Court. They have been laser focused on the Supreme Court for a couple of generations. This isn't new, folks. Nothing new in all of this. In fact, you know, here on this program, I've been talking about the Supreme Court from, well, almost day one of the 17 years I've been doing this program. Because over the last 25 years, if you think about it, you go back to 2000, you know, they decided the 2000 election that arguably changed the direction of this country irreparably. When they decided, no, it's not important that we count the votes. It's not important. No, shut that stuff down. Now, whether Gore would have won or not when the votes were counted, you know, we don't actually know. Because our Supreme Court, thank you, Sandra Day O'Connor, decided that actually counting the votes would have been injurious to George W. Bush. Actually counting the ballots. Because, well, they didn't want to look into all of the shenanigans and all of the stuff that was going on. And you go through from that point forward, the conservative majority that has strangled our courts, deciding that money was speech and that corporations were people, giving the moneyed interests so much more power, consolidating power back into the hands of corporate interest with forced arbitration clauses, saying, well, sorry, consumers, you can't file class actions anymore. You've got to go to arbitrators. Sorry, workers, you no longer can sue your employer. You've got to go to the arbitration. They decided that. Struck down Voting Rights Act. No more pre-clearance. No more worried about any of that stuff. defunded unions. Now they're attacking abortion rights. And what's interesting is I hear people going, no, Rick, well, you don't understand. You don't understand. We're just limiting the power of federal government, putting it back into the hands of the states. No, that's not what you're doing at all. You're limiting the power of we the people to decide for ourselves what we're going to do in our individual lives by giving it back to corporate interest and the moneyed interests. Because, any steps that limit the power and moves us closer to abolishing progress puts us in a situation of being subservient to the benevolent dictators. Now understand, this isn't going to stop. We're going to continue down this path because they've been telling us for a long time. Same-sex marriage is going to be on the docket at some point. Contraception is going to be on, interracial marriage probably at some point. There's going to be all this stuff. All of the 20th century is going to be back decided. And someone said, no, they're not going to do that again. No. Josh Hawley said, quite frankly, he thought that the Obergefell decision was wrongly decided. Texas Republican Ted Cruz, look, I've said multiple times, I think Obergefell was wrongly decided. They keep saying this. And when they say, I think all this stuff was wrongly decided, what they're saying is, we're going to go back after it. We're going to undo it. They're telling us what they're going to do. And they're telling us they want this Dickinsonian worldview of desperation and poverty and a pliable workforce. I've been saying for a long time, look, while same-sex marriage, not my thing, not my issue. Abortion, not my issue. You go down the list, the voting rights thing. I'm not a minority voter, really, not my issue. But understand, an injury to one, an injury to all. If we allow, and this is where from the labor point of view, that if we allow one of us to be attacked, if we allow any of us to be attacked, all of us eventually get attacked. Because we're all in this together. We're all in the shark tank. It's just a matter of when the shark gets hungry for us. The old Pastor Niemöller quote from back during World War II. First they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the socialists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for me, and there was nobody left to say anything for me. This is that happening. And it's happening right before our very eyes. You're never going to be pure enough. And for me, this is just one more tick down to the box. Another bit of the 20th century going away. And for me, I look at the reality, education being a huge part of it. One of the biggest decisions of the 20th century, Brown versus Board of Education. Separate but equal was the rule of the world back then. It's no longer. Equal is what we should be striving for. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, equality. But that's not how they see this stuff. And understand, the conservative movement has never given up. You go back to Brown versus Board of Education. That's where a lot of the conservative organizing came out of. Uncle Milty and the whole voucher movement sprung out of Brown versus Board of Education. The whole alternative school stuff, that's where a lot of that stuff began springing up. All of the attacks on public education, because up until then, why would you attack public education? You controlled it. But as soon as you said, no, you've got to be equal. Oh, well, we got to have our own thing. Understand, they're coming for each one of us. You are never going to be pure enough. You are never going to agree with the benevolent dictator enough. You are never going to be in line enough. None of this is liberation from big government. This is subservience to corporate power. at best, the benevolent dictator. Again, if you're pure enough, and you're not going to be. Now, for me, as a labor person, as a working person, I know where this then leads next. Okay, we're going to go after abortion rights. We're going to go after same-sex marriage. We're going to go after contraception. We're going to go after education. We're going to go after voting, and then we're going to go after labor. They already went after public sector unions and defunded public sector unions with their Janus decision, but it's much bigger than that. It's all of those rules. And this is where it's important from a working class perspective to understand the world that we came from and the world they want to return us to. They want to return us to the days of the Lochner era. And you need to understand what that era was about. Simply put, if you were hungry enough and desperate enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, it was your right, it was your freedom, it was your liberty. Liberty of contract was their mantra, and we're hearing it again, only now it's just freedom of contract. It's your freedom to go work for all of these gig groups. It's your freedom to work for all of these organizations who are going to exploit you. It's your freedom. It's your freedom. And this is where they're going to take it. They're going to destroy maximum hour laws, minimum wage laws, safety on the job laws, all of this. And take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s. This is the problem of where we are as a country. And this is the frustration that I have in the moment that we are, because they have pitted us against each other. They're separating us. Like I said, abortion, same-sex marriage, these aren't my issues. They're not something that they could go away tomorrow and it wouldn't affect my life at all. But what I understand that the person next to me, the person, a friend, a relative, an acquaintance, it affects them. And I understand the idea, an injury to one, an injury to all. And this is a big part of that. This is a big part of that. So I get to that, and it's angering and it's frustrating. And it is what it is. I got to take a quick break here, but let's quick get a phone call in here before I take a break. I guess we got Michael on line one listening in Chicago on WCPT AM 820. Michael, what's on your mind?
Well, I think we should get more people voting to support your programs. I'm for a woman's right to have an abortion and all the progressive programs, but we got to get more people voting. And one way we can get more people voting is to talk about 17-year-old kids that have the legal right to vote in the primary election in 25 states in the United States right now and in the city of Washington, D.C. A lot of people think you got to be 18 years old to vote in any election in the United States, but it's not true. In the last 5-10 years, they're lowering the voting age for primary elections, but nobody knows about it because it's never on TV, it's never on ABC or CBS, so it's being kept kind of a secret. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and in 2014, they changed the laws to allow 17-year-old kids to vote in primary elections, but they still have to become 18 years of age before the general election.
Right.
So that only covers maybe half of them, but it's still a huge number of people. I like to briefly mention some states these are battleground states that have 17-year-old kids voting. If they knew about it, they take advantage of it. Like Illinois, where I live, Indiana has it, Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, Maryland, Utah, Colorado, and Nevada. They all have 17-year-old kids voting in the primary election. Now, a lot of people don't even believe me because they've never heard this before, so I tell people that are a little skeptical about this to go to Google and Google in 17-year-olds voting in the USA. And there's about 20 articles there by nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations that talk loud and clear about the 17-year-old voting in the primary elections.
Yeah, good.
So I would encourage people to tell these would usually be seniors in high school. I would encourage parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts to tell their children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews to vote,
Absolutely. Right there with you, Michael.
17-year-olds.
Great stuff. Appreciate it, man.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Good stuff, Michael. Appreciate it. Absolutely. I agree. I want people voting early. I want them getting as quickly as they can get the vote, get hooked on it, and absolutely. Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So as we've been talking about, look, this decision, this leaked decision so far, this is huge, and it's important, which is why I think the anger we're seeing, more than justified. In fact, should have been seeing it years ago. But I saw some tweets yesterday that got my attention, one of them by Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, and that's why we've asked the Lieutenant Governor to come and share some thoughts on why this issue is so important to her and to the women in Illinois. Lieutenant Governor, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I saw your tweet, abortion is health care, multiple times down the line. Why?
Well, I think it was important to just, first of all, emphasize the fact that abortion is, in fact, health care. And what Republicans are trying to do all across this country is to take away the right for women to decide what is best for themselves, what is best for their futures, and to make decisions that only women should make about what is best for their bodies. When I tweeted that, I was angry, I was sad. I was devastated as I thought about women all across this country who don't live in a state like Illinois, where we have done everything we can to make sure that a woman's right to choose is enshrined into state law. And just really, I was processing, quite frankly, the monumental impact that this will have, assuming that this leaked memo does become the decision of the United States Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade.
Right now,
and I'm particularly devastated. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, the reality is this is, I've said from the beginning, this is going to be destructive to poor and working class women, especially poor and working class women of color. I think this is directly aimed at them to create even more desperation and poverty and all of the things that the right seems to love, because their policies don't seem to ever want to address it. And I got to ask you, as someone in government, are you as frustrated as I am by the fact that the people who are pushing this kind of draconian stuff down people's throats are the same people who are pushing against the policies that would encourage women to want to bring children into the world? Things like nutrition, things like healthcare, education, housing, safe schools. We could go on for hours. Is it frustrating to you?
I mean, it's absolutely frustrating to me, and I think you just touched on what I was going to say about how overturning Roe v. Wade affects every one of us, and it will be our most vulnerable, low-income people, women of color, people from our LGBTQ community who will be disproportionately harmed. And what's frustrating to me, as you just alluded to, is that, they claim that this is all about, quote-unquote, sanctity of life, but that's not what this is about. This is about controlling. This is about controlling women's bodies. It's about controlling our futures and not trusting us to know what's best for ourselves. And as you said, not making sure that even when these, when babies are born and women become mothers, the policies don't reflect that we want to make sure that these women and their children have what they need to not just survive but to thrive. And so it's just backwards thinking, and is not something that really, for the last 50 years it has worked, right? We've had this right to health care. We've had this right to reproductive choice in health care. And now all of a sudden they want to change the law, and it's going to do a lot of damage to a lot of families.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Lieutenant Governor. As a 55-year-old white guy, this isn't going to affect me personally, but I've got 2 daughters. I want them to have every opportunity that their grandmother's generation didn't have. And the horror stories that my mother's generation told me, I never want my children to have to live through. And this just seems mean-spirited. It seems wrong. And it seems like, well, all of the progress of the 20th century is being ripped away from my daughters and future generations, well, because they can.
And you know what's sick about that? Because I'm also the mother of daughters. I have 4 daughters, 3 of whom are adults. And what's sick about it is that when we think about what we want for our children, we want the next generation. We want our children to have it better than we had. We want our children to have more rights than we had and more access to opportunity. But overturning Roe v. Wade, if that is exactly what's going to happen, and it certainly looks like that is the case, is going to put our daughters, the next generation, in a worse position than we were in. Yep. So it does affect all of us. It affects the parents. It affects, family members and community members, and it affects our whole country. I'm proud that here in Illinois, under the leadership of Governor Pritzker, we have been able to safeguard and protect a woman's right to choose and reproductive rights. We want to stand on the right side of history. Our members of our General Assembly, as well as advocates and activists from across the state, have made sure that it's enshrined in our state law, and that we got rid of that trigger law that was here in Illinois. If and when Roe v. Wade is overturned, there will not be a trigger law in Illinois. Unfortunately, that's not the case for far too many states in our country.
We're at a really bad time. Last question. I know you've got to get going, but it just seems to me that this is mostly couched in hatred towards women. And I point to this tweet by Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida. He said, how many women rallying against overturning Roe are overeducated, underloved millennials who will sadly return from protest to a lonely microwave dinner with their cats and no Bumble matches. I'm trying to figure out what an overeducated woman is. Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
I don't know what he's talking about in terms of what makes an overeducated woman, but what I will say, what it sounds like, is that there's a real desire to keep women, quote unquote, in their place and not allow us to have the economic and educational opportunities that we all deserve to have. Roe v. Wade is not just an issue about health care. It is also an economic issue. It is about women, particularly as we think about women of color and women from black and brown communities, or women from lower income communities or rural communities, all of whom may be able to have the opportunity to decide what their futures look like and to try to pursue every educational and economic opportunity that's in front of them. But because of perhaps an unwanted pregnancy, that could really derail those plans. Women need to decide for themselves what happens with their own bodies, not just because it is a matter of personal choice and health care, but also because it is about their economic futures. And with the pay inequities that we already have to deal with, this is another example of keeping us behind when we should be moving forward.
Yeah, that right to self-determination is ultimately the most important thing. Lieutenant Governor, I appreciate the time. Thank you. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Will do. Thanks so much, Rick.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. And look, this, again, for me, this... I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1948. That was the day United Electrical Workers voted to strike at Univis Lens Company in Dayton, Ohio. Univis made safety lenses and instrumental optics. The UE was well established in the area manufacturing plants. Once organized, Univis fought the UE's presence at every chance they could. When the contract expired at the end of April, Univis refused to negotiate. First came the injunctions limiting picketing. This was followed by a vigorous decertification campaign. Foremen made intimidating personal visits to workers' homes, offering raises and personal loans to coerce no votes. When the UE lost the election in late July, the company announced wage increases for returning workers and firings for the remaining strikers. Workers stuck together and the strike continued. By the 26th, police swamped the picket lines, beating top UE organizers and arresting hundreds. 2 days later, the company offered a settlement for all but 11 strikers. The members refused. Then, the House Un-American Activities Committee came to town to begin a red-baiting inquisition of the UE district. The city's unions were outraged at the beatings and arrests. They walked off their jobs to bolster the picket lines and were met with tear gas. Governor Herbert called in the National Guard on August 2nd. 1,500 troops rolled into town in Sherman tanks with machine guns trained on the strikers. Scabs were escorted through plant gates between rows of fixed bayonets. Area residents, furious at the virtual martial law, flooded the governor with angry protests until troops were finally withdrawn. The strike ended in victory, with workers winning most of their demands. All but 5 were reinstated, and by the following April, the NLRB voided the decertification election.
Today, CEOs of big corporations are playing the tricky inflation blame game. Publicly, they moan that the pandemic is slamming their poor corporations with factory shutdowns, supply chain delays, wage hikes, and other increased costs. But wait, inside their boardrooms, executives are high-fiving each other and pocketing bonuses. What's going on? The trick is that these giants are in non-competitive markets operating as monopolies, so they can set prices, mug you and me, and scamper away with record profits. In 2019, for example, before the pandemic, corporate behemoths hauled in roughly $1 trillion in profit. In 2021, during the pandemic, they grabbed more than $1.7 trillion. This huge profit jump accounts for 60% of the inflation now slapping U.S. families. Take supermarket Goliath Kroger. Its CEO gloated last summer that, quote, a little bit of inflation is always good in our business, adding that, quote, we've been very comfortable with our ability to pass on price increases to consumers. Comfortable indeed. Last year, Kroger used its monopoly pricing power to reap record profits. Then it spent $1.5 billion of those gains not to benefit consumers or workers, but to buy back its own stock. A scam that siphons profits to top executives and big shareholders. Or take fast food purveyor McDonald's. It bragged to its shareholders that despite the supply disruptions of the pandemic and higher costs for meat and labor, its top executives had used the chain's monopoly power in 2021 to up prices, thus increasing corporate profits by a stunning 59% over the previous year. And the game goes on. We're going to have the best growth we've ever had this year, said a Wall Street banking titan. This is Jim Hightower saying, hocus pocus, this is how the rich get richer.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the reality is, while we've been focusing on the abortion issue, and we should, as I said, injury to one, injury to all, this is an important issue, I think, for everybody, because, look, yours is going to be coming soon, so get ready for it. What happens is, while we're fighting these battles, we're still getting ripped off at every turn, because it really is. It's about the money. It is about the wealth and power that's been extracted from us over generations. And look, our tax policy has been a huge part of this. The fact that we've got major corporations that are walking away from the responsibility of building our infrastructure, taking care of workers, sharing the wealth that working people create is, well, despicable to me. But again, they do a great job of dividing and conquering. And here to share some thoughts on some latest tax numbers that have come out. Again, some of our big boys not paying into the fund. I've asked Seth Hanlon to come talk with us. Seth is a senior fellow for economics at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Seth, thanks for taking some time for us.
Sure. Thanks, Rick.
So you guys got another study out, another shocking study, corporate America not paying taxes, making huge amounts of profit. This seems like there's one of these almost every day, and it's gotten to the point, Seth, where I'm not surprised by it anymore. It's not even shocking anymore.
Yeah, it's definition again, shocking but not surprising. I mean, I think what the thing with our new study that we looked at was we're looking at 2021, and 2021 was like a real bumper year for profits. I mean, it was the year with the biggest profit margins, all the way dating back to 1950. And of course, inflation has a lot to do with that, rising prices. So the biggest corporations in the country are making the biggest profits they've ever made. And so we wanted to look and see, well, if they're finally paying taxes. And so we looked at the Fortune 100 companies. Some of our colleagues have looked at have done this in the past with like a broader group of companies, but we just looked at the 100 biggest, and we found 19 that are paying essentially little or no taxes, including some big names like Amazon, Exxon, AT&T, and others.
Yeah, again, not surprising. But here's the thing that gets me. And again, we put out for podcasts for folks who are our podcasters, special edition podcast, the August 19th, 2019 edition of the Rick Smith Show, where we commented on the Business Roundtable's grand epiphany on how they were going to change, how they had a change of heart, like the Grinch, whose heart grew 3 sizes, because of, I don't remember, Cindy Lou Who and the hash or whatever. The Business Roundtable, you remember that day? They said that they were going to start, what was it? They were going to care about customers. They were going to care about communities. And, oh, yeah, they were going to care about workers. Yeah, that wasn't going to be it. They were going to care about workers. It wasn't only about shareholders and greed and how much they could extract from the rest of us. It was about customers. It was about communities. And it was about those workers. And then there was this little pandemic thing that happened where they had an opportunity to live those values and go, hey, we learned. And, well, I'm looking at your report going.
No, I mean, I think a lot of this is the payoff from the 2017 tax cuts. Corporations, they've always had ways to avoid taxes, but on whatever income they were reporting, they used to be paying 35%. Now, of course, they were reporting, a fraction of their actual profits, but they were paying 35% on it. And the 2017 tax cuts, of course, slashed that by 40%. And of course, and left in place the ability to move profits overseas. And so, I think it's just surprising that in the year of record profits, you're still seeing these huge companies not paying barely any taxes.
So what do you say, Seth, to the person then? Because, the argument I always get back is they're not doing anything wrong. They're following the law, Seth. This is what the law is. They're doing nothing wrong. They're paying what they're supposed to pay. This is the system. Don't beat up on the companies. It's not their fault. What do you say to that?
I think that's generally right. They are following the law. I mean, I think the problem is they had a large hand in writing that law through influence in Washington and campaign contributions. They've gotten what they wanted. I mean, not just in 2017, but for decades, we've been cutting corporate taxes and creating all kinds of loopholes, and also eviscerating the IRS so that the IRS doesn't have the ability when corporations take, not break the law, but bend it in their favor. The IRS doesn't have the ability to really go after them and making sure they're paying, what they should be paying. And not really stretching it. So, we always hear, that's what they always say. We pay every dime we owe under law, but it's not like it's not like they had no role in creating the situation.
Yeah. Now, there's some of the stories, and I read through the article, and some of the companies, really, I got to tell you, it really made me very angry. Charter Communications being the one really just sent me almost doing backflips, because just recently they completely finished eviscerating their union workforce in New York at Spectrum. Those guys were on strike for 5 years. Basically just booted them to the curb and ousted them, and our laws are so badly broken, screwed those workers over. Yet, hey, they made $6 billion in earnings, and we gave them $12 million in tax refunds. So not only did they pay zero, we gave them money, and they got to screw the workforce over. That just, I'm sorry, that's just all the wrong messaging for me.
Yeah, and you have Amazon too. I mean, Amazon, of course, fighting union efforts all over the country, and they on their 35. Amazon is one of the companies that has really, really blown up in the pandemic. $35 billion of profits in 2021, and they only paid 6% in taxes on that, and that's high. I mean, that's higher than they've paid in past years, actually.
How do average working people get that? Because I know I paid higher than that. How do I get that kind of a gig?
Yeah, I don't know. Incorporate in Delaware or something.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Seth Handlin. Seth is a senior fellow for economics at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website. If you want to check out the report that they've put out, looking at these 100 top companies that paid next to nothing or nothing at all in taxes in 2021. And remember, 2021 was the bumper year, the year that profits were the highest, and they cashed in overwhelmingly. And what they do with the money, Seth? I mean, we were told, again, this is again what we were told why we give these tax breaks. We were told that if we give them the money, they're smart. They're going to invest it wisely. It's going to trickle down to us because they're going to create jobs for us. They didn't do wasteful things like surrender and say we have no productive use for this money. We're just going to buy our stocks back or anything stupid like that, did they?
Well, I mean, of course, we're seeing it yet again. I mean, so Exxon and Chevron announced their first quarter profits, and I think Exxon's was like doubles from last year. Of course, the price of oil is extremely high, and they're upping. I think the number is something like 90 billion in stock buybacks, and increasing their dividends. And so, many of these corporations are just returning cash to shareholders. That's what keeps the stock price high. They have the extra cash to do it.
So can we bust a myth at some point that low tax rates actually help any corporation? I mean, for me, I always thought that having a high tax rate would be a better thing because it forces companies to use money to invest, because you're actually going to invest in, I don't know, new technology and machinery and workers and anything productive, anything better than just surrendering and going, no, we're just going to give it to our shareholders. Look, if we're going to take from our infrastructure, if we're going to take from our children's education, if we're going to take from, I don't know, any productive means of taxing and using in the commons to give to these corporations under the guise that somehow it's going to benefit us, shouldn't it benefit us and shouldn't it do it in a way that actually works?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and hopefully Congress can finally do something about it. I mean, we had... you mentioned the report on our website. You can also find Elizabeth Warren came to CAP today, and we had an event with her today to discuss tax fairness. And I think one thing that's striking and is so frustrating with what's happened in Washington over the last year and a half is that you actually do have 50 Democratic votes for things like the corporate minimum tax that Senator Warren has proposed. There's a consensus. Senator Sinema doesn't want to raise the marginal tax rates, but she is okay with lots of other tax reforms, including a new just 1% tax on stock buybacks that raises something like $130 billion. So there's actually a consensus among, and there is 50 votes among the Democrats for to do some real things on tax fairness. The problem is they just need to get their act together on the larger legislation, which they haven't done yet. And if they don't this year, it would be such a huge and disappointing missed opportunity.
Yeah, I fear nothing gets done because right now, because of what's going on with the Supreme Court, I fear all the oxygen for anything is being sucked out of the room as we speak. And this, when you're talking about tax stuff, people's eyes glaze over and they freak out. But it's so important because the reality is, this is where the power is. As corporate America gains more and more control over our economy and more control over our government, this is what it comes back to. And some of these myths have to be broken down that tax cuts always create jobs. They don't. We gave all of this money to corporate America, and what did it do? It enriched the very wealthy. They did not use it for reinvesting. They didn't reinvest in new technology or more capacity or more jobs. They just enriched themselves. And a 1% tax on buybacks, that just seems like a slap in the face. That doesn't even seem like it seems like a slap in the face.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I think there's just such an opportunity to create a contrast here. When the Republicans were in 2017, this was this and taking away healthcare, which they thankfully failed to do. But this was their top legislative priority, was cutting corporate taxes. And so I think there's the opportunity just to show for Democrats to show whose side they're on, and they just need to seize it. And they haven't yet, but it's right there for the taking.
Because this stuff's popular. I mean, and it's popular across political lines. I mean,
Right.
I have Trump supporter friends who look at UPS buying $2 billion worth of stock back and going, why are they doing that? Why aren't they giving their here's the frame. They gave part-time workers a good size raise during the pandemic, saying, hey, come work for us. We'll give you $24 an hour. And now they've clawed that all back, saying, no, you're going to make $14 an hour again, but we're going to buy $2 billion back worth of our stock so we can enrich the shareholders and the CEOs while literally stripping money out of the workers' pockets. That is the ultimate worst message. And look, even Trump supporters, as poorly educated as they are, they get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of unifying issue across the political spectrum that we need tax fairness, and I think it's just so long overdue, so we're just trying to do everything we can to push this over the finish line.
Yeah. So, in looking at this last question I've got for you, we do these reports and you see them all the time. What response are you hoping to get from this, from the broader public, or is this just for the Elizabeth Warrens of the world to have the fodder to be able to go, hey, we need to act on this?
No, I think it's for the broader public, and it's also for all of the Senate Democrats. I mean, it's just a reminder that you cannot to be in power for 2 years and to leave this broken tax code in place with no reforms would be such a fail. And so, it's just so striking, to Amazon paying 6% is just such an untenable, unacceptable situation, that I think, this is not it's not just the Senator Warrens who are outraged. It's all, it's all of them. And so I think this just points to the urgency. It points to the opportunity, but I think, it's up to average Americans to, make sure they make their voices heard and make sure Congress actually does something this year.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Seth, and I go back to this. We've been trained almost like Pavlovian dogs that anytime we hear the word tax, we begin to foam and shake and get all tensed up. And the reality is how we funded all of the things that we take for granted. Came from people paying taxes, especially corporations and the very wealthy. You go back to the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower. They had a very high tax rate for a reason. We had affordable education. They had health care. We built an infrastructure that was world famous. We fought wars and paid for them. I know, shocking, because we had a high tax rate and people paid those taxes. Now we just whip the credit card out and everybody knows our debt's crazy, but we don't seem to want to deal with it. This is the way forward, I think. That simple.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and of course, it's about funding priorities, but it's also just about who owns corporations. It's overwhelmingly the wealthy, and so the way the tax code has changed has really exacerbated the growing inequality in this country. So this is the year to start turning it around.
Amen. Seth, I appreciate the time, man. Always great talk with you. Always learn something. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Seth Hanlon, a senior fellow there at the Center for American Progress. Make sure you check out their website, americanprogress.org. We'll get links out on social media. How you can check out their latest report. It will make you angry. It will make you crazy, as it does me. But you got to look at it. You got to see it. Another reason why you got to make sure you're registered to vote and you get out there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That evening, a workers' rally in Chicago, Illinois, became known as the Haymarket Tragedy. On May 1st, workers across the city and around the country held massive rallies for the 8-hour workday. 2 days later, the police had fired into a crowd of workers on strike outside the McCormick Reaper plant in the Chicago neighborhood of Pilsen. 2 workers were slain and many more were injured. Angry workers called a rally at the city's Haymarket Square to protest the police violence and to call for the 8-hour day. When the police attempted to disband the rally as it was ending, an unknown person threw a dynamite bomb into the ranks of the advancing police. In their confusion, the police began firing their weapons. A total of 7 policemen were killed and an unknown number of workers were struck. In the aftermath of the bombing, union offices and labor papers were raided throughout the city. 8 vocal supporters of the workers' movement were put on trial. 4 of the men, Albert Parsons, August Spies, George Angle, and Adolph Fisher, were sentenced to death by hanging. A 5th man, Louis Ling, died under mysterious circumstances in prison. Historian Bill Edelman explained the importance of Haymarket, saying, "No single event has influenced the history of labor in Illinois, the United States, and even the world more than the Haymarket Affair. It began with a rally on May 4th, 1886, but the consequences are still being felt today." Although the rally is included in American history textbooks, very few present the event accurately or point out its significance. Throughout the world, the Haymarket martyrs are remembered, and May Day is celebrated as International Workers' Day. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So I'll tell you, I look at these reports, and good on the folks there at the Center for American Progress for bringing this up. The fact that these corporations get away with walking away with really hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars over the years. The massive redistribution of wealth that's happened in this country over the last couple of decades is literally mind-blowing. You stop and you think back, and I use that good socialist President Dwight Eisenhower thing on purpose, because by today's standards, Ike would be a card-carrying socialist. A top marginal tax rate of 92% on the wealthy. Can you imagine if someone would have? It would be heresy if someone was saying, "No, I think Bezos should pay 92% on every dime over $1.6 million." The billionaire class would literally have him strung up. But that's how it used to be. That's how that generation built their infrastructure, the highway system. That's how they invested in a healthcare system. That's how they invested in education. That's how they didn't have students who were in debt for a lifetime. That's how they built a military. That's how they fought wars and paid for it. That's how they didn't have intergenerational debt like we have now. That's how they did it. They had high tax rates on the very well-to-do and on corporate America. And I would argue high taxes on businesses are a good thing, because it's going to make business use their revenue more effectively. It's going to make them reinvest their money instead of giving it to the government. It's going to make them reinvest that money into their business to grow their business instead of putting it into their pockets or handing it out to the shareholders. If the goal of an economy is to to produce a product, to help communities, to help workers, not just to enrich shareholders. And this is the difference of mindsets in this country, and why I think that Business Roundtable epiphany was so important. What they were saying back in 2019 is, we've now learned our lesson. It's no longer just about us getting greedy rich. Even though, oh my gosh, did they get greedy rich? To the tune of trillions of dollars they've extracted from the working class. In fact, there's a Rand Corporation study out there that says it's something like $50 trillion over the last 45 years they stole from working people. Through lower wages, through ripping off their health care, ripping off their pensions. And this is one of those moments where the re-education, though, the awakening has to happen. That working people have got to start advocating for themselves in a way that we haven't for a very long time. We've got to be coming together and fighting back and saying, look, we want corporations to be profitable. We want them to do well, but they got to do well on our terms. They got to do well by doing well by us, by doing well by our communities, by not just extracting from us, but adding to our community, adding to our ability to thrive and survive. And that means part of it paying taxes. I mean, these stock buyback things, every person should be infuriated by this because it's a surrender. It's saying, we don't know what else to do with the money. We have nothing more to do with it. We're just going to divvy it up amongst ourselves. We got this windfall and we're just going to, just for us. Hooray for us, and well, the heck with you. Because we're not creative enough to take on new business. And we're not going to share it with you. In the past, now, my grandparents' generation, this is what went to wages. This is what to better benefits, health care, retirement security. Not anymore, because we don't have the power to demand it, which is why, again, I'm such a strong supporter of labor unions. Because I guarantee you, UPS, they're going to hear about these stock buybacks. Next year, when the Teamsters sit down across the table from them and renegotiate their master contract, you're going to hear about that $2 billion. And the fact that they clawed back those wages from those part-time workers. That is going to come back. As it should. And look, the reality is we've got to stand up and we've got to demand better. We've got to demand more from this. Because ultimately, we're the ones who create the wealth that they benefit from. We're the ones who do the work. And as voters, this is the really crazy part of this. We vote for politicians who don't listen to us across the political spectrum. What I'm talking about tax-wise is not insane. It's not controversial. Across the political lines, people believe corporate America and the very wealthy should pay their taxes because we pay our taxes. The idea of, the cave mentality, the bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry, the more this country is giving you, the more that is expected of you. That is not radical. But you would listen to our billionaire class going, oh, tax the richest, we pay all the taxes. No, you have all the money. And if you look at what came out of this pandemic, how much of the pie they literally took, it's obscene. And to have a system I know, but Rick, they're just following the law. And that's my problem. I don't have a problem with the people. I have a problem with the system. And the system is our fault. And we can change that. And as I've been saying, we've outprocreated them. There's more of us. So we can do this. We can do it. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. For stations cutting away here after hour one, make sure you check out the podcast or check out our website.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM.